Without rare earth minerals, the American empire falls. That's not an exaggeration. It's the cold, brutal truth. The US military, tech giants, and green energy dreams. All of it depends on rare earth minerals. And guess who controls 90% of the world's supply chain? That's right, China. But here's the bombshell. China just made another move that could change the global power balance forever. It has become the first country in the world to extract rubidium, a rare and crucial metal, directly from salt water. This breakthrough just made China solidify its position as the world's leader when it comes to this industry. And while Trump thought slapping a 145% tariff on Chinese goods would bring Beijing to its knees, he forgot one small detail. China owns the minerals America cannot live without. In fact, it is agreed that this is China's most important advantage. And what did China do in response? They quietly cut off rare earth exports to the US, and Washington panicked. That's why the Trump team scrambled to make a new trade deal, not for peace, but for survival. Now India and 5 other South Asian countries are knocking on America's door, begging to replace China in the rare earth game. But can they really compete? Or is America walking into another trap? Before we get into the details, tap the subscribe button, because this story is just heating up. Let's get right into it. In today's high-tech battlefield, war is no longer waged only with tanks and missiles. It's fought with magnets, conductors, and rare earth minerals. And in this new kind of warfare, China controls the bulk of the world's ammunition. Without rare earth elements, such as neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, modern life would come to a stop. These are the materials that power electric vehicle motors, guide missiles, fuel smartphones, energize wind turbines, and form the backbone of defense radar and communication systems. Yet, about 60% of the global exports and over 90% of the world's rare earth refining and processing capacity rests in the iron grip of the People's Republic of China. For years, Western powers, especially the United States and the European Union, underestimated this vulnerability. While they enjoyed the cheap costs of Chinese manufacturing, Beijing was quietly building a monopoly, not just on production, but on the very capacity to refine and export these minerals in usable forms. Now, that strategic complacency has turned into outright panic. Earlier this year, China announced new restrictions on rare earth exports, citing national security reasons. In truth, it was a veiled geopolitical message. Don't test us. These restrictions affected several heavy rare earths crucial to advanced manufacturing and sent shockwaves through industries in the West. As of mid-2025, numerous Western manufacturers, especially in the automotive and aerospace sectors, found themselves at the mercy of Chinese bureaucracy. Licenses were delayed, quotas were tightened, transparency vanished. The United States, long proud of its industrial self-reliance, suddenly appeared powerless. This is despite the fact that the US has the Mountain Pass mine in California. But it ships its raw materials to China for refining because it lacks the processing infrastructure to extract these minerals. Pentagon defense systems, F-35 fighter jets, precision-guided munitions, almost all depend on Chinese origin magnets and components. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If Beijing decides to fully weaponize this monopoly, the US military supply chain would stall. Experts are now warning that the United States has just 2 to 3 months left of rare earth supplies. After that, many US companies, especially in the auto industry, may have to completely shut down production. Gracelyn Bhaskaran, a top expert in critical minerals, warns that industry simply could not manufacture. It is estimated that this could cause the kind of disruptions we last saw during the 2020 pandemic. If you thought the chip shortage during COVID was bad, when car prices exploded and dealers couldn't keep anything in stock, this new crisis could hit every single car on the road, not just electric ones. Rare earths are used in everything, from your windshield wipers to power steering to the actual motor that moves the car. Ford already shut down its Chicago plant, which builds the Explorer, for a full week. Ford hasn't confirmed it was due to rare earth shortages, but industry insiders are almost certain. This isn't a small supply chain hiccup. This is the start of a manufacturing meltdown. Big car makers like General Motors, Ford, and Jeep's parent company Stellantis were given short-term emergency licenses to import rare earths. But those licenses only last 6 months. There's no long-term fix in place. When those licenses expire, unless the US finds another source or makes a deal with China, factories could start shutting down one by one. The government isn't saying much. The big car companies are staying quiet too. But inside the industry, there's panic. Workers are worried. Managers are preparing for shutdowns. So the question is, how long before this quiet panic becomes a loud disaster? It is not the US alone that finds itself helpless. Europe is in no better position. The European Union imports roughly 98% of its rare earths from China. German automakers in particular are under siege. BMW and Volkswagen rely on neodymium magnets for electric drivetrains. France and Italy have begun exploring substitute technologies, but viable alternatives are still years away. Even green energy projects, like offshore wind farms, are now facing delays due to the scarcity of Chinese-supplied components. The more Beijing squeezes, the more obvious the West's vulnerability becomes. But instead of waiting for disaster, some countries are seeking proactive solutions, and India is now stepping into a more assertive role. In a major geopolitical shift, India has launched talks with 5 Central Asian nations: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, to jointly explore and develop rare earth elements. This initiative, announced during the latest India-Central Asia dialogue, signals a bold new direction for Delhi and its regional partners. Their objective is clear: to break China's chokehold on the global rare earth supply. Together, these 6 countries hope to create an alternative supply chain, one that could eventually challenge Beijing's monopoly. Central Asia, still largely untapped, holds vast mineral potential. Kazakhstan alone has known rare earth deposits that could become strategically vital if fully developed. For India, this is more than just an economic play. It's a strategic pivot. Under Prime Minister Modi, India is accelerating efforts to secure critical minerals through production-linked incentive schemes. Demand is surging from key players like ISRO, Bharat Electronics, and private firms building satellites, drones, and electric vehicles. With more than 80% of India's rare earth imports currently coming from China, diversification is no longer optional, it's urgent. But India isn't stopping at exploration. Talks are underway to establish regional knowledge-sharing centers, promote technology transfers, and even co-develop refining infrastructure in Central Asia. If successful, this could shift India from being a dependent buyer to a central player in a new resource corridor stretching from the Himalayas to the Caspian Sea. Still, the obstacles are steep. Central Asia lacks the industrial base, survey data, and high-tech refining capabilities needed to compete with China. Infrastructure remains limited, and trained personnel in advanced metallurgy are in short supply. Meanwhile, China has decades of experience, vast scale, and tight control over every link in the chain. What India and its partners lack in scale, they hope to offset with shared purpose. Each nation sees the risk of over-reliance on China and understands the strategic value of acting together. India has already proposed a joint working group to identify mineral-rich zones and launch pilot projects, backed by a shared investment fund. We're witnessing a global reshaping of rare earth alliances. China still dominates, but the world is beginning to push back. And while India is stepping up, it is Australia that may soon emerge as China's most serious challenger. Recent breakthroughs by Australian firms reveal that the nation is not only rich in critical minerals, but also strategically positioned to alter global supply chains. Lynas Rare Earths, headquartered in Perth, has recently achieved a milestone that's sending ripples through the global industry: the successful production of dysprosium oxide at its Malaysian facility, the first commercial output of heavy rare earths outside of China. But this isn't just a symbolic win. The Malaysian refinery now has the capacity to process up to 1,500 tons annually, with plans to begin separating terbium by June. While the current output remains modest, the breakthrough proves that reliable heavy rare earth production is possible beyond Chinese borders. And that alone is enough to lay the groundwork for future expansion and restore confidence across Western industries looking to diversify their supply chains. This opportunity is opening up for Australia because of the trade between the US and China. Thanks to the trade tensions, Western countries now have a sharpened awareness of vulnerabilities in rare earth supply chains. In response, the US, Europe, and Australia are racing to diversify supply and reduce dependency on China. Australia is making strategic investments. The government has poured over 1.6 billion Australian dollars into Iluka's Eneabba refining facility and is backing Lynas with tax incentives and stockpiling funds. These efforts aim not only to extract, but to refine, and eventually to supply magnets domestically or to allies, shifting Australia up the value chain and away from mere raw material export dependency. This isn't just a mining boom, it's a transformation into an industrial supply hub. Despite impressive strides, significant hurdles remain. While Australia has strong ore deposits, processing heavy rare earths demands highly specialized and often environmentally challenging refining. Until now, most of this occurs overseas, with Malaysia being the current processing site. Experts note that Australia still lacks advanced refining infrastructure and a skilled workforce needed for full magnet manufacturing. The Albanese government's Strategic Mineral Reserve Initiative, aiming to begin operations in mid-2026, shows ambition, but may not be sufficient without private sector alignment. Lynas's own CEO has criticized aspects of the plan. But Australia isn't alone in this struggle. The entire global economy is feeling the pressure. That brings us to a bigger picture: just how deeply the world depends on China for rare earth minerals. Now let's talk scale. The global electric vehicle industry alone is worth over $500 billion annually, with the United States accounting for a staggering $200 billion of that. The global defense sector exceeds $2 trillion per year, much of it heavily dependent on REEs for missile guidance, advanced optics, and satellite systems. And the aviation industry is extremely valuable too. Boeing and Airbus combined fuel an industry worth more than $800 billion, and rare earths are buried deep in jet engines, navigation systems, and maintenance logistics. Here's the terrifying part: nearly all of it depends on China. When Beijing slows exports or withholds licenses, entire industries feel the squeeze in a matter of weeks. We're not speculating here. This is already happening. Just weeks after a rare earth-related trade truce between Trump and Xi was signed in Geneva, the US accused China of backpedaling. Beijing delayed key export licenses. Washington responded by tightening its own export rules. The fragile truce teetered. Negotiations in London dragged on for 2 extra days as the US pleaded for resumed shipments. Trump eventually declared a deal in which China would restart exports. It was so important to the global economy that the announcement instantly had a positive effect on the stocks markets. But analysts quickly warned, this was a band-aid, not a cure. We could face another dispute over rare earth minerals again, as this has become China's most important bargaining chip. But why is the US so desperate? It's because it has no backup plan. The only significant domestic rare earth mine, Mountain Pass in California, accounts for about 15% of global supply. And even that figure is misleading. It lacks the facilities to refine heavy rare earths. It has to send raw ore back to China for processing. Efforts to fix this, like those by MP Materials and USA Rare Earth, are promising but still years away from large-scale output. Unless this monopoly is broken, the world remains one policy decision away from catastrophe. The only way out is building alternative supply chains, fast. The US, EU, Japan, Australia, and India must treat rare earth independence like a moonshot mission. That means billions in government subsidies, streamlined mining permits, environmental waivers, and long-term international coordination. A unified plan to mine, refine, and manufacture at home or in trusted allies. But here's the bitter truth. Building alternative supply chains will take years. Years the world may no longer have. Meanwhile, China isn't standing still. It's tightening partnerships in Southeast Asia, expanding its grip over African mineral assets, and climbing higher up the value chain into permanent magnet manufacturing. With every passing day, Beijing's control grows stronger. For the US, the most urgent task now is securing a sustainable trade agreement with China to keep the minerals flowing. Washington claims a deal is already in place, but it hasn't been confirmed by Beijing. Will China play along? Or is America clinging to a lifeline that could snap at any moment? Hit subscribe, because we're tracking every move, and the next chapter in this high-stakes battle could drop at any time.